I feel very blessed. Sometimes you can take something that somebody does and you can turn it into a learning moment, teachable moment. So I want to really address something that it really is. I'm going to say this, it is my fault for not addressing this more often because of the amount of new viewers. So I'm going to try, and you old timers, you're familiar with this, but this is for the newer folks. Please, when you send your offerings, please do not put any designations on your offerings. This is a different type of church. You're not making it out, the check is not made out to Faith Center or to Faith Center Ministries. I've said this before. Faith Center is the building, the property. Last time I checked, I'm not sure that the property has taught you anything. This is a teaching ministry. You pay the teacher. You make the checks out to Pastor Melissa Scott. And if you give long enough, you'll see how the back of the checks are endorsed. I have not endorsed a check to me personally since I've been in the pastorate. How's that? Let alone the way we do things. So if you're not sure, you can always check the back of your check. It says where it goes. But I need to address something specifically now. Sometimes people send an offering and they don't know the terminology, and it's a slippery area because something that was meant for good can also be misinterpreted, and I have to make sure that we're all on the same page. So when people write donation, and I always say that's an interesting word because if you want to go etymology now, yeah, that is to give. However, I've always said very carefully that what you're doing here is responding to teaching you've received. So I don't really know that I'm saying this for the benefit of all. Don't really know that I like the term donation, because when you sign up at a school, a college to take a class, do you call that a donation? Well, that 50% of you answered, which means the rest of you, I need to wake up, but that's okay. You're usually paying tuition. You're paying for something you're receiving. And I don't know why we treat, especially because this is a Bible-based ministry, I don't know why we treat this any differently, but when it comes to the church and religious matters, people kind of engage in crazy behavior in terminology. So I'm going to act my own crazy on this and do some defining here. When people send in checks or money orders and put charitable gift or charitable giving, this is where I need to correct you. The church is not a charity. It has never been a charity. And I don't just speak of Faith Center. I speak of the Church of Jesus Christ. The church that he established when he said, I will build my church and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. He did not say, I will build this charity. If you trace the word, by the way, charity, this is the sad part. I actually printed out from a trusted website an etymological definition of both charity and charitable, just because in my style, this is the way I try to make things clear. Charity is a noun, it's not a verb. When somebody says you're giving to charity, if you know your English, you've got to put give in front of it, and charity comes after. So right away there, to have an add-on word tells you there's something going on that we need to make clear. But when you get to charitable, that becomes an adjective. And if you trace that word back somewhere back in the woodpile in our old language, basically, if you go to French or any other stream, you're looking at two different words, but the way we really wrap our minds around it is from either one, the word love, or the other word grace. No two people are really actually agreed on how this should be approached. But in our modern terminology, it always carries with it somehow that you are giving, and it is usually for, let me say it, some cause, some reason, something, some drive. Now, this is a nonprofit, not for profit, that's one thing, but not all, you You can't say all nonprofits are charitable organizations, even though they fall under, and I won't bore you with the tax laws, okay? You're like, oh, I didn't come to church to hear about taxes. Okay, I won't bore you. But please, folks, do yourself a favor. If you're giving because of the Word of God, you are not giving charitably. A charitable donation or a charitable check, a charitable, whatever you want to call it, to a charitable foundation which has a said purpose. For example, let's just say the Red Cross. There are entities that exist that are labeled as such. The church was never labeled a charity. Unfortunately, we have people that have over the last 100 years morphed the church into what they think it ought to be. And if you're listening, and you're still listening right somewhere out there in TV land or wherever, please either stay tuned. They'll eventually, in the next probably couple of hours, play my late husband explaining a taxonomy, as you can basically do this to any business or any entity or anything. You can pull it apart and figure out what is its reason for being, and break down the components to figure out its reason for being, how it functions. They'll play that at some point, and it's well worth it to listen. It's very educational to approach the church not as a charity, but it should be as, number one, the thing that belongs to the Lord, a people that belong to the Lord, the Lord's. And the last time I checked, the Lord's people, nor the Lord, nor the things that belong to the Lord are a charity by the definition we use in modern terms. So please, for the sake of, and I'm speaking to a few who probably just don't know any better and say charitable contribution on their giving, just, we know there's only one thing we do here. You don't have to worry. When you're sending a check or a money order, it's not as though there's 1,000 different things like a circus going on. One thing exists here. There's only one function. There's only one avenue. Now, don't get confused. Some people try and send money to Dolores Press. Dolores Press is a tax-paying, full-fledged business. It does business. It pays its taxes and so on. Don't send extra money to Dolores Press and say, oh, well, you keep the rest for a contribution. It doesn't work that way. That is a for-profit entity. It cannot take those type of gifts. Here, this is not a charity. So I hope I've made this clear. I guarantee you that my folks, my wonderful staff, will dig out some good teaching to play that will follow this message in the next hour after the message on these types of definitions and giving, so we can all be on the same page. Unfortunately, what happens is people who are just starting out, they haven't heard 20 and 30 years of teaching, such as many of you have, so it becomes somewhat of a problem when this becomes a reoccurring theme. So every once in a while, I'll have to do this. Not that it's bad. It helps new people understand that this is a different way and a different approach, and it's as biblical as we can get. I'm not going to say that everything is followed to the T perfectly. That would be legalism. But this is a teaching ministry, and I've said many times, according to the principles of Galatians 6:6, Paul said, one of those translations, in fact, it's in this book. I should just read it to you, so I'm not just, I brought it here for another reason, but I might as well read you what it says so you don't think I'm making this up. Sometimes I think when I say things, people say, well, does it really say that? Yeah, it really does. Well, New Century says, anyone who is learning the teaching of God should share all the good things he has with his teacher. Those who are taught the Word of God should help their teachers by paying them. Those are some of the translations out of... So, I'm not a charity. Pastor Melissa Scott Evangelistic Association is not a charity. And when we get into, if you want terminology, I'll do it later, not now. Now's not the time, but I'm really talking to those new folks out there. I love that you're wanting to participate. I'm asking now that you get on board with understanding these terms actually matter to me. and they really are important for us to all to understand. Doing charity, charitable things is one thing. Participating here is another. And believe me, when I say this with all my heart and with all due respect. There isn't a greater form of worship than giving. Giving of your time, giving of yourself, giving of your money. There isn't a greater form. You can go through a lot of lip service, but when you start actually putting yourself out there, including your pocketbook, that's where the rubber meets the road. So I just want to make sure that I'm informing those who want to participate or who are participating what they should be doing. Now, with that long speech, the ushers are going to come. It's offering time.